Welcome to Cooper Talk. I'm your host, Steve Cooper, and remember, I'm only as hip as my guests. I got to tell you something, people. We have a great show today. This gentleman, man, his band, Kula Shaker, they are busy. They're doing some festivals this summer. They're coming to America in September. They're working with the Dandy Warhols, and then they're doing some headlining shows. And they have a few videos out of new stuff that I really dig. And Ray sent me the Broke as Folk video. I watched that. I want to talk about that because I know you have a background in you've directed a few films. Do you have an input into your videos, or how do you produce your videos now?
Well, yeah, we make our own videos, and you know we started in the ancient '90s, and we had a few bad experiences with videos that cost £250,000, and we didn't like them, and we didn't think they represented us, and we thought they were stupid. So, you know, and then we had to pay that money back to our record company. So you have a few experiences like that, and one of the things that we became very interested in when we started our own label was, you know, being able to just make our own videos and keep it simple, have a good idea. You know, a good idea doesn't necessarily cost £250,000. So yeah, we have a lot of fun, and this last one actually I got it's all me. The other guys got to be able to stay at home, which they were thrilled about, and I was left roaming the cliffs of Cornwall dressed as a Russian hussar, like you do.
Exactly. Now, where did you come up with that idea, though, for the song? Because I always wonder, you know, how you encapsulate, as you said, back in the day, some videos didn't make any sense. The record company would say, do this, and you go, what's this have to do with a song? I have no idea. But for you, how did you come up with because it's got the war theme, and how did you come up with that? And is that stock footage, or did you actually have extras as soldiers?
Oh yeah, we had extras. We had hired out some cavalry, and they were all up for being in a music video. The thing is that the song's called Broke as Folk, and you know, like a lot of people, you know, the world just doesn't make sense. I mean, maybe it never did, and but the absurdity of everything is just like in your face now, right in your face, and also the financial squeeze that has you know. In the West, we've managed to avoid the worst of it, most of us, for most of the time. But it's the cost of living now has gone crazy. So everyone's feeling broke, and everyone is also feeling, you know, just a little bit in crazy, to quote Seal. So I was just thinking, well, what does it mean, broke as folk? Is it just about money? I think it's more about like feeling broken, and like reality is broken. And how you process that, and what's really important, you know, what is it where you draw your value and your meaning from, and where does it come from? Is it your faith? Is it your family? Is it you know, foraging for wild mushrooms? You know, things that money can't buy.
Well, it's funny you talk about the broke, because, you know, I moved back to New Jersey, where I grew up 7 years ago after living in L.A. I was in L.A. for 18 years. And now I talk to friends out there, and it's like, you know, what we pay for our mortgage of our condo, me and my wife, rents 3 times out in L.A. for a shithole. And it is amazing, because a lot of people are going through that. There's a lot of people who are just, you get nervous, and it's crazy, but it's good you're addressing something like that, because people tend not to want to talk about that. You know, people have this pride thing. So it's good that you can bring out something as a musician and make it people that say, hey, it's okay what you're going through.
Yeah, and it's just like everyone's dealing with it as well. I mean, everybody's kind of going a bit schizophrenic. So and I think you know, you have to. It's the laugh that turns into a cry, you know, or it's the cry that turns into a laugh. They're very closely connected, and you know, I think it's just out there. You tend to connect with people when you talk about these experiences, and you know, it is happening. And you know, the really crazy part of it is that the people who broke the system, the people who just rinsed it and create all these wars and destroy the environment and everything. These are the same people that are saying, now leave it to us, right? Give it. We'll take control of everything now, absolutely everything. It's cool. Don't worry, we got this. Well, they did it the first time round, So that's something to look out for too. I think everybody's becoming, hopefully, fiercely independent. And trying to avoid, tyranny. Basically, I think tyranny seems to be looming everywhere, all over the world.
Exactly. So now when you write the song, and the song before that, Charge of the Light Brigade, and in your career, what is your writing process? Do you come up with the lyrics first? Do you come up with the catch first? Because I do comedy, and comedy, jokes just pop into your head. Okay, for me, it's simple. And some you sit there and I've outgrown, so I put them on Twitter. They're stupid throwaways. But then you work on stuff. So mine's always been, I've never been able to just sit down and write. Things pop into my head, but strip it. What's your writing process now, and has it changed? Because you've had a very long career.
Yeah, I still haven't worked out the process. I'm still discovering it every day. I don't have a formula for writing hits. I think you just got to be open to ideas coming to you. It might be a lyric, it might be a melody, and then letting it kind of unfold and have a life of its own. When you come to record it, sometimes you record something or you're developing it. You get an opportunity to play it in front of an audience as well, and then you think, wow, this really works, or no, this is terrible. Everybody's going to the bar. So it's a process. It just there are no rules. There are no secrets. It's just you just got to experience it.
Now you have a tour coming up, and you're going to be in America, and you'll be working with the Warhols for some, and they'll be headlining. How do you get ready for that? Because one is a shorter set, one is the longer set. And I know for me, for comedy, if I do a 30-minute set, I'm locked in. A few weeks ago, I had to do a 45-minute set. I was nervous as shit. I'll be honest. Even though I knew I could do it, I was nervous because I don't have that muscle anymore. I do shorter things, and I don't do it as much. How do you guys get ready for a tour? Do you practice, a opening set, and then you practice a headlining set, or do you just expand?
I think our set with the Dandies is not going to be very much different to our headline set. We're not doing like a 30-minute set. I think we're doing a good hour. So we'll just explore a bit more, and if people throw out any requests, probably jump on that. We have a rough structure to all of our gigs, but we usually change it in the heat of the moment, according to how it's going. And we always wanted to be one of those bands that have a fluid, spontaneous approach to playing. And even when you've got a song in the set, we'll always play it differently every night.
So, tell me about when did you start getting into music? If people don't know, Crispian has a lineage to royalty in your family. You come from a very successful entertainment family. So, as a kid, what made you go into music instead of acting? Because a lot of times I've talked to different actors' kids, and they that's what they grew up around. So, what made you decide? And of course, later, as you said, you did some screenwriting and directing, but what made you decide on music instead of acting? Because it seems like for a lot of people that would be second nature.
Oh, I did think I was going to be an actor to start off with. I was just a kid, and I saw everybody doing it in my family, and I assumed that it was a decent living, and you should try it. The truth is, most actors are unemployed, so it's not good. It's not a good choice unless you are obsessed and you get lucky, or you can't give it up. And I think with music as well, it's the same thing. It's like falling in love. You got to fall in love. It's got to be real. There's got to be really not that much choice. And if you're lucky, you get an opportunity to make a living out of it, and or it might not. That might not be your destiny. You know, it might be something that you do. You know, as a hobby. Who knows? I mean, even people who do it as a hobby now, they can still make their own records because you've got the software and you can work at home. So I think it's changed. It's changed the way people approach playing music. It's very, very hard to make a living from music now because of what happened with streaming and album sales. So as soon as you have a family, as soon as you get into that part of your life, the pressure to make a lot of money is you know, it mounts. And so many musicians I know, they're all part-time. So you got to be mad to do it, basically. In love, obsessed. Well, being in love is a type of madness. It has to be a calling, like the priesthood, you know, a priest of rock and roll.
So when do you start playing music, and who were your influences? Because it's funny, I was reading about you, the people who probably came by your house, you know, was like, so as a kid, you probably just grew up with like second nature. You know, I always talk to people, it's like when I lived in Hollywood, when I moved back here, when I'd see someone, I'd go, man, that looks like such and such. But when you're in Hollywood, when you're at a bar and someone's sitting next to you at a bar and it looks like, you know, whoever, it is that person. So what was it like for you growing up with the amount of the English acting royalty? I mean, I'm sure your grandfather was very good friends with. Did you just sit there and just think, oh, that's Laurence Olivier? Or I mean, what was it like as a kid just hanging out? For you, it's every day.
Yeah, there was a lot of luminaries that I saw up close. They were all very good at drinking wine. They liked to chat and entertain each other. I mean, as a child, the people I was really impressed with, I mean, Larry and Larry Olivier and all those people, you know, they're more impressive now when you think back. But at the time, the people who really impressed me were like Bill Bixby. I met Bill Bixby, who'd been the Incredible Hulk on television. That was a life-changing moment. And then another time I met Harrison Ford, dressed in costume as Indiana Jones at some studio. I didn't know where I was. I think I'd been asleep in the back of a car and turned up outside a soundstage with my mum, and there he was. But that's why I think I felt that acting was going to just be an obvious choice. But I got into guitar music, man. I mean, I started. A friend of mine gave me a Deep Purple album. Deep Purple, made in Japan. That's one of the great live records. You know, one of the great rock band live albums, and it changed my life. And the Kinks, and then, you know, bands that were playing when I was, you know, a teenager, Stone Roses, and, you know. So I grew up in a time where there were a lot of guitar bands that were young as well. So I kind of connected the Manchester bands at Stone Roses. I connected it with, you know, going back to the Monkees and the Beatles and all the great pop music and rock and roll, obviously. So I became like my kids. You know, they've become. They love music so much. They're interested in the whole spectrum. They love you know, studying the roots. They love to go back and see, well, who and so listening to, and a lot of people who like music now, who like, you know, hip hop and everything, they'll study the samples, they'll study the soul records and the jazz records, and then they'll study the influences on those bands. And that's the great thing about music. It's archaeology, you know. You go back in time and you see this evolution of styles, and you end up with this conclusion that it's all spiritual. You know, comes from the church, and you know, that's why we love it. You know, it's like it's all about. We all want to be transcendent. We all want to connect with some higher existence, higher pleasure, higher love. So. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, I got to ask you though. I got a question for you because I just thought of when you said this. Because I tried to play guitar when I was younger, and I was awful. But the one lick I wanted to learn, and I think anyone my age, and when you said you're a deep Purple fan, was "Smoke on the Water." That was the one I could sort of figure out at the beginning. Do you remember like the first riff you learned on the guitar? Because you were listening to these guitar masters. What you still, as a kid, do you remember the first like riff you went, "Holy shit, man! I just got that." Because mine was, I sounded a little bit like "Smoke in the Water," but it wasn't good.
Yeah. No, you mean my first riff that I wrote, or the first riff that I
you played, that you learned when you were a young guy picking up a guitar? Was there something that just caught your ear and you went, I gotta play that?
Yeah, I think it was "Smoke on the Water." I think it was. I think for a lot of people, it was like it's something so primal. I think it communicates on a deep genetic and sort of ancestral level. Whatever Ritchie Blackmore, who wrote that riff, wherever it came from, it was somewhere deep and primordial.
It's one of those things that everyone knows that riff. It's funny. I always sit there. I mean, it's you sit there and it's. I was in this. So okay. So you're loving the guitar. When do you decide to go for it as a musician? What happens?
I think I just became obsessed, and a lot of as I got more and more into the Beatles as well, the more I got into songwriting, the more I wanted to do it as a living and tour the world, but it's a calling. You have to. There has to be a sort of an intuition that it'll work out. There has to be this sort of sense of belief that there's something's waiting around the corner, because I was plagued by self-doubt, like everyone is, and there has to be some suspicion that it's going to work out that keeps you going, and it did in the end.
So how do you end up forming Kula Shaker? Is it just something that, you were ready to form a band? What was the formation? Because it's not like now. Now people can form a band by just putting something on the internet like, hey, I'm looking for a guitar player, or I'm looking for this. Back then there was the magazines where it would say, we're looking for a bassist. But how did you formulate the band, and how did you end up coming up with your sound? Because your sound's very distinct.
Well, I did know Alonzo from college, Alonzo Bevan on bass, and we did meet Paul, our drummer, through an advert in an old magazine. I think it was Melody Maker or Loot, one of these classified sections. And we found that we had the strange connections with him as well through a friend of his who had kind of got into Krishna philosophy and run away and left his band. And so he now was without a singer, so he joined our band and found himself surrounded by people who liked to go to the Krishna temple, which rather worried him. He was out of the frying pan into the fire. And then we met Jay because he was quite famous for having this sort of 60s bowl haircut that looked like a German helmet. And he had a Vox Continental organ, like Ray Manzarek from the Doors, all the 60s garage bands. So we wanted to steal him. And once that band was kind of formed, I went off to India, and I had some work to do there, and some adventures to have. And I said, when I come back, let's all get a flat together, let's live together like the Monkees, like the Banana Splits, and give it a go. And we did, and we lived together for 2.5 years before we got signed. And I think that's part of what gave us our sound. That you start to sort of merge psychically. You start to intuit what each other's going to do musically. And when you learn to play together from a young age, it's like an imprinting. It goes very deep.
So when you go to get signed, what was the music scene like where you were at, and how did the record companies look at you? Because it is a different sound, and that's the thing. People, record companies, how it is. If like in LA when the metal scene blew up, you know, one band got signed and hey, we're going to sign every band that sounds like them. And then finally you get there and go, holy shit, these too many bands sound like these bands. Did you guys have a hard time getting a record deal? And as I said, what was the scene like when you guys were trying to get signed?
Yeah, well, when we first started recording together, living together, it was just sort of like just post-grunge, and nobody really knew what was going on, and it was a very sort of purgatory in Britain. And then as the Blur and Oasis Britpop thing started to happen, we were still getting rejected by record companies. We kept changing our name so that when we made a new demo and sent it in, we'd have a different name so that it wouldn't get, you know, chucked out. But the Beatles anthology also was released in the mid-90s, and that became a huge cultural shift, actually, because a whole generation was rediscovering the Beatles, and a lot of the modern bands were referencing the Beatles. So when we came along and we sounded like we'd just come back from Rishikesh, there was just a more of an open attitude, and we managed to slip through and get in there and get signed, and it was a lucky moment.
What was it like for you guys going into the studio? Did you have all your material already set? Because you have been playing for 2.5 years. It's not like you're saying, hey, let's do this. I mean, how much material had you accumulated? And when you went in, were you just ready to kick ass? Because I'm thinking it may be a little bit intimidating because it's what you want. But as you said, self-doubt, any performer has self-doubt. It's what you want. But then you go in the studio and you go, holy crap. Like, what if I don't deliver? Because I always say performers, we're 50% narcissistic and we're 50% insecure. And because we think we want it, but then when we get it, we go, oh, well, I don't deserve this. So what was it like when you guys went in the studio?
I think we were really excited, and then, you know, literally the day before or the day we went in, we suddenly became very anxious. We went in the studio with a lovely guy called John Leckie, who produced Radiohead, and he produced the Stone Roses, and he had actually started off as a tape op at Abbey Road. He'd worked on All Things Must Pass, and he had so many stories. We had to have anecdote breaks during our session. But, you know, we went in there with maybe 50% of our songs had been played for quite a while. Hey Dude, Govinda, Night on the Town, and these kind of tracks. And then songs like Tattva we had them for a little bit, but we hadn't finished writing them. The middle eight for Tattva was written when we went in the studio, and so there was a certain amount of development, but the pressure was on for sure. And there were times where it wasn't particularly pleasurable to be recording. It was just trying to get through the day without having a nervous breakdown. There was a couple of moments where our nerves were shredded. John was a lovely guy, but he wasn't a brilliant communicator. So we were very young, and we needed a lot of reassurance sometimes. We did a B-side session. We went in and we didn't give a crap. What you know, it was no pressure whatsoever. We played a lot of it live, and the vibe was so good. And the songs were surprisingly good. Songs like 303 came off the B-side session, so we ended up using those on the record because they were so much more fun. So again, that record, it revealed itself gradually over time. It wasn't we didn't go in there with the sort of master blueprints. You know, it was actually a little bit of a work in progress.
How hard is it, as you said, he wasn't a good communicator, being young, how hard is it to work with someone like that who's not a good communicator? Because you don't, the artist doesn't usually know about production right away, and all of a sudden I would think it's like a director, well, you've directed movies, the director, you have to communicate. You can't just sit there and go, you know, unless you're the Colin brothers and give them a script, that's all, you just go act. But so how important was it, how important do you think as an artist is it that the producer has to really communicate?
Yeah, no, John was very much a sort of slightly introvert character, and he used to like smoking his jazz cigarettes, and it was now and again he would sort of drift off in his own world, and he was a great engineer, but he was not a great communicator. At one point, we were setting up the drums in this stone room, and we were arguing with him that the drums sounded tinny and the clack clack. It wasn't the kind of warm group, kind of funky sound that we wanted. I think it was for Tattva. And he said, I don't understand what you guys' problem is with this. Phil Collins recorded Feel It in the Air Tonight in that very room. And we just said, right, unplug those mics, get it out. We just overruled him because that was an 80s record. That was like evil music for us. So there were moments where, we just made that executive decision, and even though he was far more experienced than us. We had really good communication with Bob Ezrin, who had done so many great albums. The Wall, Pink Floyd's The Wall being one of them. We struggled a bit with Rick Rubin. He and communication with him, we didn't really see eye to eye on things with him. It's a relationship. You got to try it out. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
So the first album comes out. Do you remember the first time you heard one of your songs on the radio?
Yes, I do. I was in the BBC. I actually had. We'd mastered the record. We'd mastered the first single, "Grateful When You're Dead," and I didn't like it. I didn't like the sound of it. I just didn't think it was the kind of warm analog rock and roll record I wanted to make. Like, I wanted to be more like the Who, or something. And it just sounded very, I don't know. It just sounded too produced. So, and then I went to the BBC to do an interview, and just before I did the interview, I went to the bathroom, as you'd say, and I heard it coming out of a tiny little speaker, like one of those pinhole speakers that comes from the roof while you're standing at the urinal, and the record sounded amazing. Echoing in that room, it sounded absolutely amazing. And I realized that modern records were made to sound good on the radio. They were made to sound good in lifts. They were made to sound good, as in the background in a supermarket. But they weren't like those old records where you were listening to them on a big system, and the more you turned up the volume, the more exciting it sounded. This was I was living in a different time, and it hit me at that moment, standing at that urinal, what I was dealing with, and I had mixed emotions. It was nice to hear the record sounding so good, but not in such an environment.
So you start getting popular. I want to know, tell me about Top of the Pops. I always like to hear stories of Top of the Pops because it's so big. It's like us when we had the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. I knew comedians who were a little older than me. They did that show with Carson, and the next day they're opening for a huge act in Vegas. The whole career would change. And I know in over where you're at, Top of the Pops, everyone's been watching it forever. So how many times were you guys on it, and what was it like your first time? Did you see a change?
Top of the Pops, which has now been stopped, it hasn't been around for maybe 10 years or so. It's very sad. It was an institution, like you said, of British music and all international tracks, but especially, it was one of those TV shows that if you were on it, everyone would have seen it. The next day, your destiny would be either you'd be finished or you'd be, off to the races. But actually, we did Top of the Pops. We'd already charted, and so it wasn't such a change for us. The big change was a show called The White Room, which was a load of bands playing live in a very big white room. And it looked interesting graphically, and it was around the time where all the Britpop guitar bands were playing that show. So and then some of the dance acts, but you know, Oasis would play it, Blur would play it, we'd play it, you know, and Happy Mondays, and it was a big deal. And I remember we managed to get on that show and play live. We played Govinda live and Grateful When You're Dead live, and the next day everybody knew who we were. I think because we were quite different to those to all the other Britpop bands, and we sang, you know, Govinda, and we had our Indian friends singing with us, and we just stood out like a sore thumb. And so people either loved it or hated it, and it was a good moment.
So the first album, I have to do a follow-up. So how was the process of doing the follow-up? Because like right now, I know you just had an album come out in 2024. You plan to do one in 25, plan to do in 26. You're going back to the old days when, like, in the 80s, when it was every year a band had an album came out. You knew, like, okay, the Police have an album. Well, a year they're going to have one. So what was the process for your second album? Did you feel pressure? Because I've always heard it's very pressureful when you have to sit there, and especially in your head, of course you want to do better, because we all want to excel. So what was it like when and then you took a little while to do it, right?
Yeah, we were under masses of pressure, and it was the best of times, the worst of times, to quote Dickens. It was exciting in some respects. Working, we cut a track in LA with Rick Rubin and George Drakoulias and Sylvia Massey. They were all working in the same studio with us on the same track. It's completely insane. Got 3 producers. Sylvia Massey was engineering. George Drakoulias was producing with Rick, because we couldn't decide who we were going to work with, Rick or George. So why don't we both do it? And they were like, yeah, okay, why not? So the studio room was completely packed full of these huge American producers and these skinny little English guys, and it didn't really work out. So we came back to England and started working with Bob Ezrin on the Pink Floyd Houseboat studio. So, you know, in some respects it was absolutely fantastic and very creative, but we spent longer on it than we should have done, to be honest. Partly because we didn't want the process to end, because when it ended we were going to have to go out back into the music industry and face the pressure and to deal with the promotional juggernaut. And we were a bit young, a bit fried out. I think we wussed out, to be honest. I think we just wussed out of the pressure and had to do a little bit of a reset.
Now, what was it like touring back then? I mean, because, everyone always hears these tours are so glamorous, but it's a lot of work, man. I mean, it's studio, early morning radio, driving, this and that. What was your experience in touring in the early ages?
Oh, we toured everywhere. We didn't have time to think. Honestly, we were just flat out. We were signed to Sony, and at some point, somebody decided that we were going to be an international, worldwide priority for Sony. So people were saying, we need them in Malaysia, and they were saying, we need them in Tokyo, get them over to Berlin, and it was like we were literally just being pulled this way, that way to do shows, to do press and all the rest of it. And every now and again, you get given a bill for, oh, what's this? A bill for £18,000. What's this for? Oh, that was a jet that flew you to. Oh, we got to pay for that, did we? Okay. And it was absurd. It was all completely absurd. But what you remember is playing shows and playing to people who know your music, and that side of it obviously was great. But it's a fever dream, and every now and again you might bump into somebody who you get on with or you admire. We did a great tour in America. We did some great tours in America. We also did a festival tour. We did the Horde tour. We toured with Beck and Neil Young at Ben Folds 5. That was a good experience.
What
So
was
yeah,
the,
we were busy, man. We didn't have time to use the toilet.
except to hear your record? What
Yeah,
what was Glastonbury like? Is that a big thing for? I know you played it what in '97, I believe. Is that something really big if you're from England? Is that a big like here it would be like if they did Woodstock again? People go, oh, we're going to Woodstock, or well, it used to be Coachella was big, but now it's all across the board. But what was Glastonbury like? Was that something really big for you personally in the band?
Glastonbury is the biggest festival in Britain, and it's probably the most famous festival in Europe. It's one of the most famous in the world. Um, it takes place in a it's a very famous part of England as well, called Glastonbury, which is also known as the Isle of Avalon. Is the ancient kind of the center of the church in ancient Britain, and also before that was the sort of Druids center. I mean, it's a magical place, and even if you don't, even if you don't believe in magic, you go there and say, well, somebody believed here, and they've been around for a long time, and perhaps there's a reason why this festival still happens there. I think we our first ever gig was at Glastonbury Festival when we were kids, and we snuck in, hid in the back of somebody's truck, stole in, plugged into the Krishna tent. They had a generator, and we plugged into their generator and played for people who were eating the feast, the vegetarian feast. And that was our kind of spiritual baptism as a band. So we always felt a connection with it, and we did a bizarre festival in 1997. We headlined twice on the same weekend because we headlined on the Saturday night, and then we were all getting ready to leave the next morning, and the organizer came and said Neil Young's chopped the top of his finger off, making a ham sandwich or something, and we don't have anybody for his slot. Will you stay and do an afternoon slot or something? And we said sure. So we went and played on the main stage, took Neil Young's slot. We went on after Sting, and so I think it was crazy. A few people threw mud at us, and then we kind of won them over. So we've had some strange experiences at Glastonbury Festival. It's very different now to how it used to be. They have a wall around it. It's 500 quid a ticket or something. It's not for everybody anymore, but it's still very much celebrated.
So you guys are doing great. What happens? Why did you guys break up?
Oh, just couldn't handle the pressure. We were too stressed out. We were just kids, and we fed off the enthusiasm. We fed off our love of doing what we did, and we found ourselves in an environment where we just were not. We were, there's that old saying, "Don't let the bastards get you down," and they did. They just really got us down, and they won, and we wussed out, and then you get up again a few years later and say, "Oh, what was I thinking?" And we started our own label, and we started playing music again, and we just did it for the right reasons. We did it absolutely. We weren't really. We just tried to bring our family back together, which was our musical family, and we're still great friends, and the band's kind of just sort of picked up again, and quite unexpectedly, we got Jay back. He because when we started our label again and we started making music, he joined Oasis by this point. He was touring all over the world with those guys, so we had kind of lost him, and we didn't expect him to come back because he had a really good job, and we couldn't compete with that, and the ship had sailed, and we just sort of wished him the best. But when he came back, that was a huge shot in the arm, and that's why we've made an album every year for the last 3 years.
Now, when you did break up, What was that first few months to a year like for you? Because I always think when you hear bands break up, it's like your family. It's like when you work on a movie set. You get to know the crafty guy. You get to know this guy. So it's like a family. For you guys, you were together you were together, you had success, and I'm sure a lot of your identity is wrapped up in the band. You're the lead singer for Kula Shaker. So what was it like for you? Was it hard for you to find your identity again? Or was it something that you just easily just took to and you said, okay, it's over, it's time for me to move on?
It wasn't really a case of identity. I didn't have an identity crisis, but it was definitely a time to ask yourself what it is you're trying to do, because we had some pretty lofty ambitions in that band, and we achieved most of them on the first record. So like doing Munch and that whole kind of creating that whole world that Kula Shaker existed in, and having a chart-topping #1 album all over the world, and that was, well, what do you do now? We thought that was going to take us years to pull off. So that was kind of confusing. I was, my father died, and I had and George Harrison died. It was quite an existential kind of moment, really, in terms of what am I trying to do, rather than who am I. Although I did have a bit of that kind of self, exploration to do, and I ended up doing quite a few years of, that kind of personal work. I did some therapy and, worked on some issues. So it had to happen, It wasn't particularly good fun, but, I'm happier for it now.
Now, when did you start screenwriting? And I want to know, for you, what's the difference and similarities about writing a screenplay? It has to be 120 pages or 88, structure, and songwriting. When did you start to do the screenwriting, and did your knowledge of songwriting help you with that?
Yeah, it's interesting. They are very similar, and at the same time, it's it's a different kind of discipline. I think writing a song or an album and writing a book are closer than writing a script, because you can do anything in a book. You can go anywhere, and same with music. Can you imagine making a record and then getting a bunch of people in, having them listen to it, and then they can go off and say, we change this and change that and change that chorus and move the key. It's absurd. But that does happen when people make films. They'll play it to an audience, and then the audience feedback will determine whether they go off and reshoot the whole thing and change the ending. It's crazy. But I did find that when I started writing, I realized that there was a lot of frustrated filmmaking going on in my musical life anyway. That I was always approaching albums as if they were movies, and always approaching songs as if they were stories, and trying to create pictures and scenes in people's minds the way that I enjoyed listening to music, especially psychedelic music, that would create a scene and be so vivid. Some of my, like, one person I met when I was a kid was Phil May of the Pretty Things. The Pretty Things were a very influential R&B band in Britain, and then they made a lot of amazing psychedelic music. And one of the greatest psychedelic singles of all time is theirs, called Defecting Grey. If you listen to Defecting Grey, it's like a little mini sort of Kafka-esque movie, very surreal, very absurd, and so I just sort of tapped into that and realized, one part of my brain was making movies, even when I was making albums.
Now, when you directed these movies, did you remember your experiences that you dealt with as we talked earlier, the producer who didn't communicate? Did that pop into your head because you already had gone through some of that where you're like, I want my actors to feel comfortable? What was it like to also then you're directing your own stuff, which, once again, it's hard, but what was that like for you?
Oh, it was great. I was very lucky, especially on my first film. I was very lucky to work with Simon Pegg, who was very supportive, and also he's such a pro. He had that real classic British actor approach. Famous British actors, famous across the world for being very, very good, very, very professional, no nonsense, turn up, know their lines, and he got stuck in. He was, he's a very, very, very good actor as well as being a funny guy. He's also a great actor. So I was already working with very, very top people. So it was quite easy. But then there is something that happens on a film set. However well you prepare, surprises happen, and they're not always nice ones. So sometimes you just have to kind of wing it. And winging it on stage with a guitar or winging it in the studio is very different to winging it on a film set, right? Where you just sort of see how it goes, because you've got a whole crew of people. Every minute is costing hundreds, if not thousands of pounds. And so sometimes you just have to, experiment, and you need supportive people around you if you're going to experiment on a film set. And there's less and less money now. I mean, you see, these great little clips of David Lynch, in the last few years, being under a lot of pressure to just crack on and be shooting the script, and he wants to let things breathe. He wants to explore a little bit, and he just loses his patience and tells everybody, go to hell. And it's a lot of pressure. A lot of pressure on set, but that's part of the excitement.
What's more pressure, writing and directing a movie or being a front man of a band? Because both are very different, but both are, you're in the helm. I mean, even though you have a bassist and stuff like that, a drummer, I mean, you have everything, you're the front man. So what comes easier to you in your mind?
Oh, I think they're both. You see, the strange thing is, it's strange that you're I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before, to just sort of see those two roles in comparison. They're both high pressure, and the similarity between them is that they're both the kind of job that people look at and say, "Oh, wow, that's the dream gig," But the price you have to pay for the dream gig is the pressure. And I've even talked to other guitar players and people in bands about, what it is if you have to play guitar and sing and be the front guy. They still don't understand that basically, you're juggling on a unicycle. It's you can't really enjoy either. You're not enjoying going for a ride, and you're not enjoying your juggling. You're having to just be completely focused. And it was like that. I mean, I love that quote of Stanley Kubrick's, was about what's the hardest thing about being a director, and his answer was, getting out of the car in the morning, and just the what you have to face. The pressure to make the decision, the pressure that you've got to be the one person who knows what's happening. But I do tend to sort of I can manage pressure for short bursts, and you just have to not fall apart until afterwards.
Now, over the years, do you feel like you've grown as a front man, and is it something you want to do? Because sometimes, I mean, if you're a good front man, that's fine. You can stay that way, and people are still going to say, "Oh, he's a great front man." They only say if someone fucks up, they go, "Oh, they're losing it." They always do that with social media. But for you, Are you still the same frontman you were when you were young, or have you developed a little and just learned things on the way and really honed that craft?
Well, I think the more, yeah, as you get older, hopefully you get a bit more grounded. Need to be quite grounded to in yourself, and have a sense of being in the present to do a really good job. And I think that people used to get off on the energy of Kula Shaker, just the raw, youthful vitality of our shows, and but I think that we still have the energy now, but I tend to just be a little bit more tuning into the audience. I tune into where the audience is at better now than I used to then. But because I come from a family of professional bullshitters, the actors. We're old-fashioned British theatrical family, so that they always said, that you're the servant of the audience. They've paid their money, right? So now you go out and you act like a fool. And if they want to do their knitting or they want to go to the bar, that's their choice. Your job is to hold their attention, and that's the gig. So you always kind of had that drilled into me anyway, that you're supposed to serve the audience, but you got to do what you do. You don't change who you are for the audience, but you have to make it as compelling as you can, and you have to connect with them. You have to kind of like look into the whites of their eyes and make sure they don't go changing.
Now, are you looking forward to playing in the U.S., or do you like American audiences because you're coming over? And I'm sure when you play, everyone's different. They play, if you play like in the Orient, the China, or whatever like that, people they know so much, and it's a very different experience with the crowd. Do you like American audiences?
Well, I'm not going to say I don't like them, but I'm going to say that America's a pretty big country, pretty different, quite different people all over. I think American Kula Shaker fans, obviously there's going to be a thread there between them. I know that when we used to play festivals, and I know we're going to play Levitation Festival on this tour. It's always interesting to play to other people's crowds as well, or a mixture. We've always had a very warm response, and I don't know. I mean, America's the sort of home of rock and roll, So if you go and you play this kind of music, going to America is it's a big deal, and we're still very romantic. Actually, we're still romantic about America and the roots of the music. We feel we can't give it up. We can't give up thinking of you guys as the colonies.
I have one final question. You've had a very successful career. You've had a very interesting life. When you look back, what are a few things, and this could be personal or professional, what are a few things that make you really proud?
Well, I don't know. Pride isn't pride one of the deadly sins. I don't know about proud. I mean, there's some wonderful moments that Paul was telling me, our drummer Paul was telling me that every now and again somebody asks him about Kula Shaker, or asks him this kind of question, and he will tell a story. We were recording in LA with Rick Rubin, and we went into his Bentley to check the mix, see what it sounded like in the Bentley, and he was headbanging in the Bentley, and the car was bouncing around, and we thought, how did we get here? And then he thought, I just sound like I made that up, or headlining Glastonbury twice in the same weekend. Did I make that up, or did that really happen? Did we really spend £250,000 on one stupid video that nobody understood? These things happen like a sort of a dream. I think everyone's life you look back and it does feel like a dream. And what you're left with is, it's like the connection with the audiences and the connection that you have with your friends in the band, and the relationships. And I love that quote by it's the last line of the last Beatles album. In the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. What did you create? What did you leave behind? And we're still making music, and we're still thinking about that. We're still thinking about what is this band about? What are we trying to leave in our wake? What kind of energy are we trying to create at our concerts? Every concert for us is potentially the last one, and we play as if our lives depend on it for exactly this reason. We want, to leave something, positive behind.
Well, thank you. That's a great answer. See that? I want to thank you for coming on. People, go Google Kula Shaker. They're coming to America. They're not playing Philadelphia. They're not playing the Philly area, but they're coming to America. They'll be in New York, but not Philadelphia. So I guess, we couldn't figure it out.
Philly next time. It'll have to be next time.
So people go check it out. Go the great videos. These 2 videos are great. They're out right now. And thank you, Crispian Mills from Kula Shaker. I'm Steve Cooper. I'm your host. Don't forget, you go to my website, coopertalk.net. You can find 1,045 episodes on there. You can also email me at coopertalk.net. Remember, I'm Steve Cooper. I'm only as hip as my guest. Don't forget, drink your water, eat your vegetables, take your vitamins, and I'll talk to you next time.